Was there a Babe Ruth of minor league baseball? Well, maybe that guy was Steve Bilko. And a new book tells the tale of Bilko and his team, the 1956 Los Angeles Angels, one of the best in minor league baseball history. Well, we welcome to the Houston Sports Talk Gaylon White, author of a new book, The Bilko Athletic Club. Great to have you with us, Gaylon. You grew up with the Angels back in the 1950s. Tell us about when you were a little kid, what captured your imagination a bit about this guy, Steve Bilko, and for that matter, that team?
Steve Bilko joined the Los Angeles Angels, which were a farm team of the Chicago Cubs, in 1955. I was 9 years old. He played with the Angels for 3 years, from 55 through 57. In those 3 seasons, he hit 148 home runs. In 1956, he won the Triple Crown in the Coast League. He led the league in 8 different categories. He hit 55 home runs, drove in 164 runs. To me, he was Babe Ruth. As I started to work on the book, The Bilko Athletic Club, I found that many others saw Steve Bilko as Babe Ruth. In fact, Bobby Grich, the former Baltimore Oriole and California Angels second baseman, an all-star, was 7 years old, grew up in Long Beach, California, 7 years old in 1956. And Bobby Grich described Steve Bilko as Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, and Mickey Mantle all rolled into one. And Bilko was big enough to be all three.
Speaking of Bilko, it wasn't just baseball fans in L.A. that fell in love with him. Hollywood also took notice. The classic TV fans will remember the character Sergeant Bilko from the Phil Silvers Show, and in '96, the Steve Martin movie, Sergeant Bilko. They were named for Steve, apparently. And he also was in a Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown. His popularity at that time in Hollywood was massive, wasn't it?
He became a cult hero, and it started with the Phil Silvers television show, which made its debut in 1955. The story goes that one of the screenwriters, Neil Simon, was a big Bilko fan and selected Bilko's name for the character of Sergeant Bilko. Later on, I have a quote in the book from Phil Silvers where he says that he could have named his character after Hodges or Musial, but he chose Bilko because he needed it more. Bilko was just, because he was a large man in what was at that time a thin man's game. He was widely viewed as fat. By today's standard, he wouldn't be any different than some of the wide-bodied players that are playing the game. But he was viewed as a fat man, and he was interesting for that reason. But also when he went to the plate, Ralph Kiner, the former home run champion for 7 straight years, and then also former New York Mets announcer, Ralph Kiner described the Bilko at bat as like you were at a heavyweight fight and you were waiting for the champion to knock out the opponent. And that's what it was like with Bilko. When he went to the plate, there was this electricity that just went through the crowd, and you were anticipating one of two things: either a strikeout, which was impressive in itself, or a mighty home run, and many of his home runs would go 500 and 600 feet.
This 56 Angels team, Gaylon, pretty amazing. Their second baseman became one of the all-time great major league managers, Gene Mauch, and you quote him in the book saying, "I managed 3 clubs in the big leagues that weren't as good as the 56 Angels." Their record was 107 and 61, and they had 6 players that actually belted 20 or more home runs. This wasn't just Bilko, Gaylon. How good was this team?
Well, it was a great team, and in my view, not given enough credit for its greatness. Gene Mauch considered this the best minor league team that he ever saw. Now, you can easily get into a debate on different minor league teams from different eras and never come to any agreement as to which would be the greatest. And many people think that the Newark Bears teams from the late 1930s are the greatest teams. But this one was a great team. Only 4 players on the entire team who passed through there that year did not make it to the majors. The team was made up of largely Cub cast-offs. In fact, the entire outfield, Bob Speak in left field, Gale Wade in center, and Jim Bolger in right, had been with the Cubs the previous year. And Wade actually started the 56 season as the starting center fielder for the Cubs. To give you an idea of just how good this team was, Jim Bolger, the right fielder, drove in 147 runs, and batted 7th in the lineup.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, what also made it a great story was the venue that they played in. The Angels basically played in that replica of Chicago's Wrigley Field. Some of our listeners might remember it as the old Home Run Derby from the old Home Run Derby TV show, which I guess spawned the modern-day All-Star Home Run Derby contest. And Gaylon, this park showed up in some legendary movies as well, right?
It was in a lot of different movies. It was, in fact, a popular movie set wherever baseball was concerned. There was a Ronald Reagan movie where he played Grover Alexander, the great pitcher. That was filmed at Wrigley Field. Damn Yankees was filmed at L.A.'s Wrigley Field. And as you mentioned, it was on the Home Run Derby that was filmed in 1958 and 59 and was the forerunner of the Home Run Derbies of the day, and in fact has been shown more recently on ESPN Classic. So Wrigley Field in L.A. was built in 1925. It really is the original Wrigley Field if you just go by the name. In Chicago, Cubs Park, of course, was built in 1914, and we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that ballpark this year. But it wasn't named Wrigley Field until 1926. So to be technical, the original Wrigley Field was in Los Angeles. Had brick walls, was in a residential community. In later years, they put ivy on the outfield wall. It had lights long before the Wrigley Field in Chicago. And the dimensions in Wrigley Field in L.A. were very similar to Chicago. Wrigley Field in Los Angeles didn't have the seating capacity of the one in Chicago. In fact, the capacity was a little bit over 20,000, and that was one of the drawbacks to L.A. getting a major league team prior to 1958 when the Dodgers moved to L.A.
You could almost call those Bilko Angels teams in the mid-'50s a cradle for managers. We mentioned Gene Mauch being on that 56 team. The next year, the Angels had Sparky Anderson and Tommy Lasorda. Plus, they played in the Pacific Coast Leagues, which produced some legendary baseball names like DiMaggio and Williams. Who were some of the players who went through that league over the years, Gaylon?
Big Poison, Little Poison, the Wainer brothers came through here. Ted Williams, Bobby Dorr. They all played in the Coast League, and they all played in L.A.'s Wrigley Field. In fact, the Wainer brothers played in the first game at Wrigley Field in 1925. There was another minor league great, Smead Jolly, also played in that first game in 1925. The 56 Angels really produced 5 managers, big league managers. Gene Mauch was one of them, the best known. Elvin Tappy, the catcher, the starting catcher for the 56 Angels, went on to be the head coach of the Chicago Cubs' misguided college of coaches. Jim Fanning, who was with the team to start the year as a catcher, went on to manage the Montreal Expos, and he also established the Major League Scouting Bureau. Johnny Goyle and Eddie Haas, who were with the Angels early on in the 56 season, they went on to manage in the big leagues. And then one of the players in the 56 Angels, a player who many of his teammates called the catalyst of the team, was the only black player, and that was Piper Davis. And Piper Davis was Willie Mays' first manager when Mays was 16 years old playing for the Birmingham Black Barons. And Willie Mays referred to Piper Davis as his second father. Davis led the Coast League in pinch hitting in 56. He batted overall .316. He played every position except, I believe, shortstop. He even pitched one game. There's a story about Piper Davis that I like when he was with the Oakland Oaks. Mel Ott was his manager, and Mel Ott, of course, is one of the other greats who managed in the Coast League, as well as Rogers Hornsby. But in this case, Mel Ott was talking about the versatility of Piper Davis and proposed playing him at all 9 positions in a 9-inning game. And someone suggested, well, if it goes 10 innings, Piper can sell beer.
I also want to mention about Piper Davis. He was a player for the Harlem Globetrotters as well, wasn't he?
He was. Again, a very talented athlete. He was a quiet leader. On this 56 Angels team, he spent a lot of time in the bullpen warming up the young pitchers. This team had some really outstanding young talent in the area of pitching. It had a fellow named Dick Drott. Dick was 19 years old, won 13 games, led the league in strikeouts in 1956. The next year, his rookie year with the Cubs, he won 15 games. Many people felt he was going to go on to be one of the all-time greats. If you look for a more parallel in more recent times. His career was very similar to Kerry Wood of the Cubs. Had a great start with the Cubs, and then arm trouble caused him problems later on. There was another fine young pitcher, a 20-year-old, and this was during an era when relief pitching was not as it is today. And certainly if you had a relief pitcher in the 50s, it wasn't a young pitcher like Bob Anderson. But Bob Anderson would come into the game and it would be just lights out. Gene Mauch compared Bob Anderson with Troy Percival of more modern times.
Well, Steve Bilko had 148 home runs over a 3-year period. With all his success, Gaylon, and these booming home runs he hit, Bilko never made it to the bigs. And you quote a rival pitcher saying he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. If he had been in the majors the year he was hitting in the Coast League, he would have torn them apart. What happened to Bilko? Why did he never become a star in the bigs?
I think there's two things, and they happened early on in his career. He broke in with the St. Louis Cardinals at the age of 20 in 1949 in the heat of a pennant race. He performed very well. Between the 1949 and 50 seasons, he got married. He showed up at spring training camp, 40 pounds, they say, overweight. He was a big boned man, so his weight varied anywhere from 230 to 275. So he was given a very hard time that spring training about his weight. Joe Garagiola was telling me how they put him in a rubber suit and they made him run. He lost 40 pounds during spring training. Took its toll on him. When he got into the game conditions, he was worn out by about the sixth inning. But two things that St. Louis did, I think, harmed him long term. One, they tried to make him a pull hitter. He was not a pull hitter. His power was to right center and left center, and he could hit the ball off any ballpark. So there was no need to make him a pull hitter. The other thing was he was an introverted man. He was very confident. At the same time, he was not arrogant. And one thing Jim Brosnan told me, and Jim Brosnan was a former pitcher and also a writer, he mentioned about Bilko that most great athletes are arrogant. And in Bilko's case, he was not an arrogant man. And he had a hard time, I think, dealing with a lot of this focus on his weight. The managers, particularly Eddie Stanky there in St. Louis, harassed him about his weight. And as a result, this kind of caused him to withdraw. He had a great season for the Cardinals. I say great season. He had a solid season for the Cardinals in '53. That technically was his rookie year. He batted .251, 21 homers, 84 RBIs. Now, he struck out 125 times, which led the league. But he was that kind of hitter. He could strike out, as he did with the Cardinals that year, 5 times in a 10-inning game. He could come back the next day, as he also did with the Cardinals, and hit 2 doubles in the same innings. Ralph Kiner is quoted as saying he was good enough in '53 and that he thought he should have stayed in the big leagues. He was traded by the Cardinals to the Cubs in '54. With the Cubs, he sat on the bench mostly because the Cubs, one of their better players was Dee Fondy at first baseman. Then the Cubs, of course, sent him to L.A. Bilko did not want to go to L.A. When he reported to L.A., the first thing he asked the then manager Bill Sweeney, do I worry about my weight or do I worry about hitting? And the manager, Bill Sweeney, said, just hit. And so from then on, Bilko would tell any writer who asked him about his weight, he would say, I weigh between 200 and 300 pounds. He would not discuss his weight. He would not get on a scale. And I think a lot of his success in L.A. was he was just allowed to play the game and play every day. And that really never happened in the major leagues except for '53 in St. Louis.
You talk about his weight, you lead me right into my next question, which was he loved beer and his weight loss regimen, as you describe it, including that him steaming up the bathroom to sweat while guzzling beer in a tub. And at Seal Stadium in San Francisco, there was a brewery outside the stadium, and Bilko told teammates he'd love to be dropped in a vat of beer. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, he was one of the all-time great beer drinkers. Nobody ever saw him affected by the beer. In fact, I think it was Ted Bolesfield said he could drink more beer in one sitting than anybody I've ever seen. Unlimited capacity for it. And the thing that baffled me, he never went to the bathroom. I think he had a wooden leg. So that was his reputation. He was a great beer drinker. But what you refer to in terms of his weight loss program, or how he tried to lose weight, he wanted to satisfy the managers he played for. At the same time, he loved his beer. So Jim Brosnan called his weight loss technique the steamer. And this is where he'd take a six-pack of beer into the bathroom. He'd seal off the door by putting towels against the bottom of the door. He'd close the window, and he'd turn on the shower and the tap and the wash basin the hot. Then he'd sit on the edge of the bathtub, or he might sit on the toilet, while all this steam would rise, and then he'd drink a six-pack of beer, all 6 bottles.
Well, Gaylon, this is a great time and a great team and really amazing stories. The minor league's always full of great stories, and we really appreciate you coming on to share the stories with us.
Yeah, thank you,
Well,
Gaylon.
I thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to just kind of leave you with this quote from the book. Jack Hanna, who was the brother of Joe Hanna, the backup catcher in that team, I think Jack puts this all in perspective, and it's one of the reasons why would you write a book about a team that played its last game 58 years ago? Why would you write about a player, Steve Bilko, who retired last season was 1963? And I think Jack, with this quote, really puts it into perspective. And Jack said this: "What would life be if it weren't for the remembrances? We have the future of which we know nothing. We have the present, which is so close and moving so swiftly by that we can't make much of it. But the past is as clear as our memories will allow. It is the memories of the past that convince me how important what I'm doing is in the present." And I hope this book, with its memories of the past, help baseball fans recognize that baseball is still a great game today. And we have the past, I think, to compare with the present and really relish the game itself and the stories that the game has produced.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.